The objective today is to describe how we can guard against attacks like the Mirai botnet. So this will be a short video. We're going to first talk about the abstract I found from a Usenex conference. The second thing is just the basics of how this botnet works. Then I want to bring some relevancy of this topic to your lives if I can, and then we'll end the lesson by talking about variants. There's some really cool variants on this Mirai botnet. So here's the abstract. Forgive me, let me read a little bit to you. It says the Mirai botnet, composed primarily of embedded and IoT devices, took the internet by storm in late 2016 when it overwhelmed several high-profile targets with massive distributed denial of service attacks. In this paper, we provide a 7-month retrospective analysis of Mirai's growth to a peak of 600,000 infections and a history of its DDoS victims. Okay, and then you can read the rest of the abstract yourself. According to Wikipedia here, an abstract is a brief summary of a research article, thesis, review, conference proceeding, or an in-depth analysis of a particular subject. For the students that like cybersecurity and you want a maybe career in cybersecurity research, you'll be creating some of these reports or presentations for conferences, and therefore you'll need the ability to do some of this really highly technical writing. So for anyone who gets upset with me in class about doing a lot of writing, well, writing is thinking. That's why I ask so much of it from you. And if this is a field you're interested in, you'll want to be used to it and actually good at it. So with that, my think right here is, what is an abstract? And then I want you to go ahead and look at this abstract again and tell me, what is the most frightening fact? Is it that there are 600,000 devices infected? Or the idea that they're going with embedded devices? Or the fact that it's utilizing embedded systems? Like, if this is your first time hearing of Mirai, what scares you the most? And so I pulled one more thing from this research paper, and by the way, if you want to read it yourself, you can find it at this link. But I found this interesting chart that says the country, the number of devices infected, and the prevalence. Just interesting to think that some of these attacks we hear about, they're on a global scale. So let's try to summarize Mirai in its most basic, what is it kind of term. Alright, so far we know this thing, Mirai, has had a huge impact on the world. 600,000 devices, and it's a global thing. Well, Mirai, which is Japanese for the future, is a malware that turns networked devices running Linux into remotely controlled bots that can be used as part of a botnet in a large-scale network attack. Its primary target is IoT devices that have their own IPs, such as cameras and even home routers. The Mirai botnet was first found in August 2016 by Malware Must Die. This is a white hat malware research group and has been used in some of the largest and most disruptive distributed denial of service attacks. And this is including an attack on the 20th of September on one of my favorite websites, Brian Krebs' site. Now, the source code for Mirai was published, so since the source code was published, just anybody could read it. The techniques have been adapted in other malware projects. So I'm asking here, like, what does this mean for security researchers? Well, if you're just starting out, if you're a student in my class, this is great. You can look at that code. But also, so can other bad guys, and they can use that to try to make variants. This is change it for their own purposes, which is a pretty scary thing. So let's talk a little bit about how that can be done by talking about the steps that Mirai takes in its attack. So the first thing this botnet does is it scans for IoT IP addresses. And inside the source code contains a list of what I'm calling no-nos, like these are Department of Defense IPs or private networks. This software, this code, is scanning the internet for certain IPs. Now, the next thing it does is it identifies the vulnerable IoT devices using a table of more than 60 common factory default usernames and passwords, and it logs them to infect them with this malware. A lot of people, when they buy their IoT device or they buy a router, they don't change the default username and password on there. So once Mirai took control of the device, it can download this malware on it, And something I found really cool is what this malware will do is it'll identify competing malware and remove it from the memory and block remote administration ports. So if that device was already owned by someone else, another bad guy, another hacker, it kicked them off and then it closed the ports so they couldn't get in again. After that's done, the device will monitor a command and control server, which indicates the target of an attack, and the reason for the use of the large number of IoT devices is to bypass some anti-DOS software, that is, denial of service software, which monitors the IP addresses of incoming requests and filters or sets up a block if it identifies an abnormal traffic pattern. So, for example, if too many requests came from a particular IP address or a particular range, it'd be pretty easy to cut off that range. But with these IoT devices, it's like you're getting hit on so many different ends that whoever is being targeted has no other choice but to shut down. Or for people trying to access that server, they will not be able to because the server is handling all these botnet requests. In December 2017, researchers identified a variant of Mirai exploiting a zero-day flaw found in HUI routers, to accelerate Mirai botnet's infection, implementing two known SOAP-related exploits on a router's web interface. So you can learn more about these weaknesses or vulnerabilities by going to CVE 2014 in this number and CVE 2017 in this number. My cybersecurity students really dig into these common vulnerabilities and exploits documents. Now that we're talking about a whole year later, this Mirai version, which is slightly different, right? It's looking at a different vulnerability. This one is called Satori. So I'm just really loving the Japanese names of these attacks. Satori is a Japanese Buddhist term for awakening. So I wonder, Japanese Kyrie Irving fans might say that he is Satori instead of saying he's woke. Little joke for you there, laughing gets you extra credit in my class. Well, let's talk about these embedded systems. So it says an Argonaut RISC core processor is the second most popular embedded 32-bit processor, and this was shipped in more than 1.5 billion products per year. And this includes all the things in my brackets. Basically, though, you should note that most of these things are not having these embedded chips on them running Linux, so it's not actually a vulnerability to this Mirai botnet. Did want to jump on this opportunity to teach you what an embedded processor is. It's basically a small chip. There's a fascinating website called embedded.com where you can see like some of the newest things in the world of embedded chips. These chips are way less powerful than what your CPU chip is, takes less electricity, and is just not handling as sophisticated of things. And everything from cars to NASA, probes and satellites might have these types of chips. Just think of them as really specialized chips. And the coding for them is often done in assembly or C, maybe C++. They deal with memory constraints and they're working directly with the hardware. They don't have to worry about an operating system. Part of the reason they're not using as much electricity. They're just something that I've been really interested in lately. And I found an article on this website where a guy is saying, by his estimates, okay, he's not a professional researcher, but your average middle-class American household includes over 40 embedded processors. Like, they're all over the place, especially in your cars. So these chips, which are in many IoT devices, are the ones being targeted. And to step back in time a little bit from where we were at in 2017, when this Mirai botnet first started doing its thing, one of the services it was attacking are these DNS services. What this meant is people could not go to some websites such as GitHub, Twitter, Reddit, Netflix, Airbnb, and many others because people could not ask the domain name system for the IP addresses of these popular websites. So I heard a joke that someone said, like, toasters are taking down these billion-dollar companies. I guess that's if your toaster is connected to the internet. So who's responsible for all of this? Well, in January 2017, computer security journalist Brian Krebs posted an article on his blog where he is saying that he knows the person who did this. Somebody named Anna Senpai, named after Anna, I can't say that name, which is a character from a popular anime, I guess. So this was just a nickname, a pseudonym. The real person is Paris Ja, and the person owned a DDoS mitigation service company. And the most surprising thing, they were just a student of a college, a student of Rutgers. And Paras, however you say that name, they put in a plea of guilty. But like I mentioned before, Mirai was published openly, like open source software published, so anybody can read this code. And there's a lot of variants. Apparently, researchers are pointing to this new name of Nexus Zeta, who is authoring other variants such as Okuru. I brought up Satori before, another name Masuta and Pure Masuta. More botnets for us to be worried about, so this story is sort of like to be continued. Now, Krebs on security is pretty well known in the cybersecurity community. I suggest checking out his website. And here's that article where he is basically talking about the botnet and who did it, who's responsible, and the areas it affected the most. Just a great article. Did the Mirai botnet really take Liberia offline? And if you scroll down a little, then it says, why taking down Liberia's internet is easy. I wonder if these are one of those underwater cables that deliver the internet to different parts of the globe. I know there's definitely one under the Mediterranean Sea, and terrorists like to try to cut these cables. So that's it for the lesson. Your demonstration of learning here is using all your notes from today. How do you think we can guard against Mirai botnet? Or maybe I should say botnets in general, now that there are all these variants about. And I hope you appreciate my little picture here of a Cheeto acting as a lock to a door, sort of like what your security is like if you leave your username as an admin and the password as admin.